All right, X-Factor Botwoon. Put together a quick tutorial here on the setup that I use and that a lot of people use at this point. It's called the Defactor, named after Decalled, a Super Metroid runner who developed it. And it relies just on movements and a couple of visual cues. There's no sound cues to worry about, no music cues to worry about, like with some of the other setups. And I find it really intuitive and thought it was pretty easy to learn. It's not, no single piece of it is super precise really, but it can be particular because there are several moving parts. So the most important things are how much run speed you have entering the room, when you start charging your shot to do the X Factor, your movement immediately before the X Factor comes out, and what you do after the X Factor comes out, and then where you end up once the particles have flown around the room and Botwoon's ready to come out of his hole. The goal of this is to have all 4 of the X Factor particles hit Botwoon, converge on Botwoon's head as it emerges from the top left hole at the start of the fight. And then after that, hit him with 6 super missiles, which will be enough damage to kill him. You can kill him in 1 round, and really good runners can have potentially as low as a 12x room time. That's the entire fight, collecting drops and leaving in 12 seconds and change. At first, you probably won't be that fast, but you can still get, it's like 15-16 second room times if you can one round, and from there it's just refining things. And so let me show you the setup a couple of times. There may be some mistakes here. Like I said, there are a lot of moving parts, but the basic idea is always going to be the same, and the keyword's consistency. Like whatever you exactly end up doing, if you can do that the same time every time and get the particles to hit Botwoon the same way every time, then you'll be able to do the fight much more consistently. You'll start off with like a nice chunk of damage taken out of his HP, and can just adapt to the patterns from there. So here is what the setup looks like. So that's not quite what it looks like. But all right, so yeah, that's the basic way it looks. As you can see, the X particles came out, they kind of pulsated across the room a couple of times. As Botwoon's head came out of the hole, they converged, and then I shot him with 6 supers to finish him off, end the fight, and get out of there. As you can see, that wasn't the most optimal, and it was still got 1354. Yeah, there are a lot of very subtle ways that this strategy can go wrong, but I think maybe I'm not jumping high enough there. But like I said, no single piece is super difficult to do, but they are a lot of moving parts kind of going all at once, and they can be a bit particular. So I'll show it one more time, and then I'll kind of break it down piece by piece. And so, yeah, Botwoon has 3 patterns he can do. Ideally, you want the one where he kind of comes out and goes along the bottom of the room here. The one I just got is generally fine too. It's just more likely to take a hit there. The one where he goes along the top of the room is the most difficult one to deal with, but like as long as you can get the X particles and at least a few supers, even if you have to 2-round him, it's not that bad. But yeah, so see if I can get the top pattern version. No, but all right. So the first thing you need to be aware of is the entry here. You want to have basically as much dash speed as you can. It doesn't need to be like pixel perfect edge of the platform or anything like that, but you do want to be like kind of on the left half of this this pipe tile here. As long as Samus's like foot is above like this little white line in the middle of the pipe, that's fine. You can be here, you can be farther back. You just don't want to be much farther forward than this, because the dash speed you enter the room with is important to the setup, because you need to get to the wall as quickly as possible. So usually what I do is I'll run through these speed blocks here, kind of bonk and then jump up and tap forward. That gets you here, and you know that's a perfectly fine position. Whatever you do to just get up and be standing on the left half of this tile, it'll work just fine. You're going to want to hold dash and run through the door. While you're going through the door, you'll start holding shot. It'll buffer a shot to come out when you come through into Botwoon's room. That'll start charging. You're going to run all the way to the wall. As soon as you hit the wall, you want to jump, a full jump, bonk the ceiling and turn around, and then land in kind of a specific range, horizontal range. The X Factor will come out, you'll wait for the particles to cross, and then once they do, you'll get into position where you can easily hit Botwoon with supers. And so I'll kind of show that again. And so hold dash, run through the door, start holding shoot during the transition, buffer your shot, bonk, jump, turn, particles cross. And so I'm delaying my jump a little bit too much here. You want to go like immediately. Because if you wait too long, then Samus will not be in the right vertical position when the X Factor particles come out, and she'll have the wrong speed, and so they'll do kind of funky things. So you want to bonk, immediately jump, bonk the ceiling, immediately turn, get into your position wherever that is. I like to, for that part of it, I personally like to land about here, like on the left half of this little the top of this little square rectangle pipe thing here. Some people land further over. I think generally you want to land between here and here maybe, but test it out yourself. See what feels most comfortable to you. The important thing is not where you land, but that once you're above where you're going to land, you just immediately stop with any horizontal momentum. You want the X Factor particles to come out when Samus is only falling straight up or down. If she's moving side to side, like if you're still moving when the X particles spawn, they do all kinds of weird stuff, and it's bad because you cannot shoot your beam or missiles or super missiles or even charge a shot while the X particles are out. And obviously that makes the fight slow. It can make things go wrong very, very easily if you start panicking. And in general, you just want to, if you're going to do the X Factor, you want to make sure that all of the particles hit Botwoon or they all miss as quickly as possible, but that kind of comes down to luck if you do get it wrong. So Again, run through, buffer the shot, bonk, jump, bonk, turn, stop your movement, get into position in Suprim. The position I like to be in is basically right here, so above the very right edge of this hole here. You can also use the bits on the floor as a visual cue, either above this right-hand dot of this set here, or with your toe like right before this little line between the dots. Whatever it takes to get you basically to this position. If you go too far left or too far right, sometimes it will still work, but usually it won't, and you'll offset the position of the particles very slightly, but enough that one will stay out. And see, I'm kind of surprised that worked. It doesn't always work if you're that far over, just depending on how you get there. It's best to just not have to worry about that and just have your consistent position from the start. But yeah, if you find a different positioning that's more consistent for you, great, but this is one that I've always had success with here. Couple of things to note there. When you are moving over to that position, you want to make sure the X particles cross over each other after spawning before you start moving at all. If Samus has horizontal speed, like if you're moving left or right, when the particles cross, again, they do weird things, end up in weird places. Sometimes you'll luck out. Like there, I hit all four still, but it can very much not go that way, and it's slow, and it's sad. So make sure that you're not moving when the X particles cross over, but then as soon as they do, you want to start and get into position here. That was an issue with mistiming my jump. So again, you want to bonk, jump, bonk, turn, land. And if the X particles, there are a couple of ways that they can look correct, but if they cross in like a straight X kind of shape, that is a sign that you have the correct speed, and that as long as you get into position, they will do what you want them to do. You'll notice that I'm holding R this whole time. That's because it allows Samus to stop on a dime. So basically, when you have run speed, if you release forward, it takes Samus a little bit to slow down before she actually stops. So if you're trying to stop at a specific place, you have to stop early, and it can be really finicky. If you're holding an angle button, then no matter how fast you're going, if you release forward, you just stop immediately in position, which when you want to end up in a pretty specific place is super, super helpful. People do that little bit of movement in different ways. Like, I prefer to do a couple of little steps, stop a little short to give myself room to adjust if I need to. Usually, sometimes I will just do one big one, but I try to do the little ones. But you can also do something like that, as long as you wait for the X particles to cross properly before you start moving. But yeah, you can definitely do something like that. Just for me personally, doing a couple of like little stutter steps is a little bit more consistent, but obviously do your own testing. If something else works for you, great, go with that. Most people have like tiny little things they do differently here with their positioning and speed. The important thing isn't to do the exact same setup as any other runner. It's to just find a set of movements that make sense to you, that you can do consistently the same every single time you do the fight, and that feel comfortable. Because as long as you can get the particles to hit, and you do the same thing that makes the particles hit every single time. Like whether you like stutter step or just do one big step, or whether you land here or you land further over, like it doesn't matter exactly what you do if it works and it feels good. But don't try and do stuff that you're not comfortable with. That's like a pretty good axiom for speedrunning Super Metroid in general. Just like find something that's comfortable and consistent and just stick to that. A couple of other notes. If you do something like start holding your shot through the door, it's best just to cancel the setup and just try and do the fight with as many supers as possible. This corner here, anything aside, if Botwoon does anything aside from like sticking his head out of this top left hole and doing his spit attack straight down, like his swoops around the room will never come far enough over to hit you, so you can just kind of camp here, fire charge shots at him until he dies. It's slow, but it's safe. And if he does do his spit attack, generally you can just morph in the corner and the particles will go right around you. And so, you know, if you mess up the setup, it's better to bail out before the particles come out, because, you know, if the particles spawn and you do not have your setup working, it's just going to waste time because they'll fly around and keep you from shooting. Let's see. And then, yeah, you want to leave here with at least 2 supers. So try to conserve them if you can, because you need 2 supers to get through the door in the Ghidorah to get to Dragon. And Botwoon is not necessarily always going to drop you supers. Generally, he'll give you at least 1, but it's not unheard of for him to give you nothing but health, or to just give you missiles and power bombs and no supers. Like, it's best if you're unsure, just hang on to 2 or 3 supers so that you don't have to farm it all in the next room. And then, I think there's one more point I wanted to make here. Oh yeah, so it's because you want those ammo drops from him, it is pretty important that you not get health bombed during the fight. So you need, when he dies, you need to be at 30 energy or higher, because otherwise he'll only drop health, which is really suboptimal. And so the best way to make sure that happens is to enter with at least 94 energy if you can. His body hits you for 32, and so with 94 you can take 2 hits and still not be in health bomb. And with some of the patterns, you know, it makes it a lot easier to shoot him with super missiles as well, if you are able to just get inside of his hitbox and take a hit and use the iframes to hit him with supers. Botwoon's hitbox is really weird. His head and has a different hitbox from his body. Each of his body sections is its own little hitbox, and they love to eat to overlap his head in weird ways and eat shots that look like they should be hitting him. But if your arm cannon is directly inside of his head hitbox, so something like that, you're not going to miss. And so if you can take a hit or 2, then just bonk him and to make sure that you get the supers. That's totally worth it. And then this energy tank here will always refill you to full. You're always going to get this E-tank, no matter what in this category. And so you can just grab it, even if you're even if you've taken damage down to 30, you know, you don't have to worry. But yeah, so that about wraps it up. Really, you just want to make sure that your setup's consistent, that it's comfortable, and that you're doing the same thing every time. Oh, also watch out for his body sections after you kill him. They can still damage you, and if you are at low enough health that another hit will take you into health bomb, you can get health bombed at the last second and miss out on drops. If you're at 30, then it can kill you, and it feels really bad to kill him and then die after you've killed him. So just do everything you can to avoid that. Even if it's a little bit slower, just get out of the way. It's better to eat like 10 frames of time loss than it is to get health bombed and have to do a big farm in the next room for the ammo you need for Dragon. But yeah, hopefully that is helpful to you in figuring out your own version of this setup. You know, if you have any questions, you know, feel free to ask. There are some particularities. The feedback when you do the strat wrong isn't necessarily the clearest, but you know, with enough practice you'll get the hang of it. But yeah, good luck X-Factoring, and good luck with your Botwoon fights.